Oklahoma State ended Oklahoma's playoff hopes. Oklahoma, I never felt like this team was a serious contender to make it to the college football playoffs. And I was really shocked when they beat Texas. And after they beat Texas, they haven't looked like the same team that we saw prior to that win happening. It's like they put all their energy into beating Texas, which looks like their Super Bowl up to this point. And after that, this team has tremendously seen a big drop off in their level of play. They struggled to beat UCF. They barely made it out alive in that game. They lost to Kansas, and they just got blasted 27-24 against Oklahoma State. Oklahoma State, during this game, they look like the better team in this matchup. And even though Oklahoma has way more 5 and 4-star players, Oklahoma State just was a better football team. They look better coached. Like Jeff Lebby, Sooner fans have been really unhappy with him all season long. The conservative play calling has been an issue, and then the questionable play calling has been an issue. There was a point in this game when Oklahoma tried to do like a trick play. I think they tried to do a halfback toss, and it went all wrong, and it resulted in a fumble, and they gave Oklahoma State the ball back. And even if you do feel like Oklahoma State wasn't more talented than Oklahoma, the keys to upsets happening is one, being on the road, which Oklahoma was. 2, losing the turnover battle, which Oklahoma lost 3-1. And then this wasn't just the first time Oklahoma has struggled with taking care of the football. They struggled taking care of the football against Kansas. And that's the same reason they lost to the Jayhawks. The same reason why Kansas lost to the Jayhawks is a similar reason why they're on the losing end of the last game of Bedlam. And I'm glad that Oklahoma State ended this rivalry game, if this truly is the last time we ever see these two teams play, with the L, because Oklahoma was not this team that people made them out to be. You see, they beat Texas, and all of a sudden people had a lot of optimism saying, oh yeah, like Oklahoma is a lock to make it to the Big 12. And I was saying, no, like this team is not what you think. Even in their win against SMU, they won that game 28-11. They struggled in that game. I was never convinced that the Sooners were going to be able to go all the way. And I never thought that they were going to be able to get out of the regular season with just one loss. I felt like they had at least 2 or 3 coming. You see, I believe in Brent Venables. I think that Brent Venables is a good coach, but I don't know if he's a championship caliber coach. You see, Oklahoma, they still don't have a lot of depth on the defensive line. Their pass rush is really inconsistent. Their defensive line is really inconsistent. Oklahoma State was whamming the ball against Oklahoma's defensive front in this game. The same way Kansas has success running the football against this defensive front. This offense, they don't got a lot of depth and talent at wide receiver. Yeah, they got a couple of guys that are really solid and really impressive, but they're not as deep at that position as a team like Oregon, Texas, Washington, or even Alabama, FSU. Oklahoma wasn't as good as a team as people thought. And I don't really think too many people really believe that the Sooners were going to be in the playoffs come the end of the season, but I got a lot of pushbacks from Sooners fans with me saying that Oklahoma isn't a true playoff contender over the last couple of weeks. People were saying that I was hating on this team. I had no reason to hate on Oklahoma. I just call it how I see it. I just try to be as fair and realistic as possible when I give my takes on these teams. And Oklahoma never looked like one of the best teams in college football. And it's evident because the difference between Oklahoma and teams like Alabama, Georgia, Texas, FSU, Michigan, Ohio State is their ability to win close games. You see, even when everything seems like it's going left for Texas, they still find ways to pull out close wins like how they did against Kansas State. Same thing for Ohio State. Elite teams in college football have something that I call the trapdoor ability. The trapdoor ability is even when you're struggling to win a game against a team that you should be able to beat, you still find a different way other than your conventional way of being able to win. Your team can win multiple different ways. Oklahoma doesn't have that. It's either they got to blow you out, or if you're able to take them to the wire in the fourth quarter, you're going to get them to implode on themselves because they're not a team that isn't able to win games without kicking themselves in the foot a couple of times. Every time you watch an Oklahoma game that ends up being close, they find ways to lose it, like they did against Kansas with costly turnovers. And they did the same thing against Oklahoma State. And Brent Venables is supposed to be a defensive-minded coach. Oklahoma State doesn't really have a great quarterback. Their quarterback is solid, but he ain't no world beater. Dylan Gabriel is way better than what Oklahoma State had back there throwing passes. But it didn't matter, because when you lose the turnover battle and you allow a team like Oklahoma State that their identity is based on being gritty, being scrappy, being a tough team, you allow a team like this to pull off the upset, especially in a rivalry game like this. When you're in a rivalry game, all the stats, everything that happened previously goes out the window. It doesn't matter about what your record is. It doesn't matter about who's more talented team, because these rivalry games seem to take on the personality of their own. And Oklahoma State was just the better coach team, and they were just more well ready to play than what Oklahoma was. Now, Oklahoma had chances to win this game. Okay, it's not like Oklahoma State just dominated and blew them out. This was a game that was decided by 3 points. But Oklahoma was the favorite in this game, and they lost on the road. Another example why I never took this team serious as a legit college football contender. Good teams in college football, the difference between them and elite teams is that they can't find ways to win on the road when they're a favorite. Alabama, Georgia, Ohio State. Ohio State went on the road, and although they struggled against Notre Dame, they still pulled off the win. Elite teams win on the road. Texas, they beat Alabama on the road in Tuscaloosa. Do you know how great of a team you have to be to beat Alabama when they're playing at home? People thought that LSU was going to be able to beat Alabama this past weekend, and they didn't, because LSU isn't an elite team. They're a good team. They're not an elite team. Oklahoma was never an elite team. FSU, they nearly lost to Boston College. Duke gave them a pretty competitive game, but the reason why they were able to win those games is because they are an elite team. Elite teams just find different unconventional ways to beat you. Oklahoma State never had that. And it's going to be a while before I believe Oklahoma truly becomes a championship caliber football team. They're going into the SEC now, next season. They're nowhere close to being on a level as a Georgia, Alabama, or even some of the bottom tier, the middle tier programs that are a little bit away from being on that level, such as Tennessee or LSU. When Oklahoma enters the SEC in 2024, they're going to go from being the big dog in a small pond in the Big 12 to being, a little fish in a big pond. Honestly, they're going to be a middle of the road SEC program. I don't think they're going to go into the SEC and they're going to be relevant, but I think they're going to go into the SEC and be like a 7, 8, maybe 9 win team at best. Yes, they recruit really well, but obviously they don't have the greatest coaching staff. People want Jeff Lebby gone, and I have some concerns about this defense. And this defensive line isn't where they need to be up front as far as being able to compete for a conference title in the SEC. Alabama, Georgia, even Tennessee all have really good defensive lines. They're all really good up front. Oklahoma doesn't have that. Oklahoma State in the final Bedlam ends up giving Oklahoma their second loss of the season and dashing their hopes to make it into the college football playoff.